Welcome to a parallel project training APM Project Management qualification podcast based on the APM Body of Knowledge 6th edition. You should be using this in conjunction with our e-learning, study guide and potentially a tutor-led course. For more information, please visit www.parallelprojecttraining.com.
Hello, welcome to this Parallel Project Training podcast. We're working through the APM Project Management qualification.
Formerly known as the APMP.
Thank you, John.
Hey.
And we're at the change control bit. Explain the different stages in change control. Explain the relationship between change control and configuration management. Oh, that's going to be an interesting one. And explain the advantages and disadvantages of change control process. Disadvantages of a change control process.
Scope creep.
Okay, we'll come to that in a minute. So let's start with the easy one, shall we? The stages in a change control process. So
Identification.
yes,
Logging it.
yes,
Initial assessment to see if it's even worth assessing.
yes,
Get approval to initially assess it.
yes,
Initially assess, and then go on and actually do the evaluation.
yeah,
Figure out what the impact's going to be in terms of time, cost, requirements, all that sort of stuff.
mm-hmm.
Get approval to either do it or not do it. And if you do it, build it into the plans and get on with it.
Update your plans and off you go. So I think most people are happy with that, aren't they?
Yeah.
That initial evaluation stage is probably the only one that's different from some people's experience. But I think it's a really good idea, basically checking. Did we look at this change request 6 months ago?
Yeah.
Have we already rejected this one? Have
Well,
we had this one from 5 people this week?
I think the danger is that the users just come along and say, "Oh, how would it work if we did this?"
Yeah.
Just a sort of a request, really, more
Yes.
than anything. So, and I mean, different trades have different terms for them, don't they? You know, they have technical queries and things like that. So,
Yes.
you know, it's a technical query. Could you just tell me if we did do this, what the sort of implications might be?
Yes.
And the problem is if you sort of get bombarded with those things, then all the people that are supposed to be doing the project are bogged down evaluating potential changes, only to have them say, "Well, we don't do it."
You
after
pull
all.
people off the real work to
And then the customer
look
comes
at
back and says,
changes.
"Well, why are you
Why are you
behind?
late?"
Well, we've been looking at all these bloody changes you've been." So I think it's moderation, isn't it? It's like, you know, you've got to be sensible about it. If you go back to the customer and say, "No, we're not considering any changes," then they'll look on you as being a bit difficult and awkward.
Yes.
But if you do too many, you'll end up chasing a field of rabbits.
Yes. Yes. So I think it's a simple process. It's more difficult in practice, but that's not the exam question. So
No,
let's move
that's
on.
right.
There are many challenges in actually getting this to work in terms of keeping the time really from beginning to end is the critical challenge. Do we need to say anything more about change requests? Or do you think we should move
No,
on?
I think people get it generally. I think they're okay with the idea. I mean, what you're protecting is the scope.
Oh, there was one thing, variations. People get confused about variations.
Go on then.
Some change, it depends. It's best just to ignore them, actually, because some changes result in variations to the contract, and some changes may not. And it just depends on the particular contractual arrangement you've got.
So you'd
Like
limit
for-
variations as a term specifically for contracts? would you?
Yes, because it depends exactly what the contract says and how they're used in the contract, really. I wouldn't muddy the water by thinking change requests are automatically variations. They may or may not be, depending on the business you work in, whether you're an internal project manager, whether you're on a time and materials contract or...
It's quite an interesting point, actually, because is the project management plan, which is where you describe everything, is that a contractual document?
Yes, that's right.
And if it is, then it doesn't matter, because by definition, if you're changing the plan, you're changing the contract.
Yes,
So
yes,
it depends on how you view the contract.
yes, but not all changes will have a cost associated with them.
No, let's not go there.
So some of them may be free of charge changes,
Like what?
for commercial reasons. Well, you may in negotiations
No, everything has a cost. Whether you choose to charge for it is another issue.
That's the point I'm making.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
point I'm making.
So
everything needs to go through
if you change anything, it costs money.
Yes, that's right. So everything needs to go through change control.
Yeah.
Whether you then pursue a contractual variation
or
as a
not.
result of that is a commercial
yes.
decision.
But you'd raise a change request and get it authorised, even if you
Yes.
chose to charge nothing for it.
Yes, but there's then a separate process almost to say, is that a change to the contract? And that depends on the contract, what the contract says, and how the contracts run.
Well, no, because if you're changing the schedule and the schedule's bound into the contract, you're changing the contract if you change the schedule. You change the specifications bound into the contract. So I don't see the difference, frankly. I mean, the project management plan is a manifestation of the contract. It's just something that it's another document, isn't it?
Yeah, but you might have that would result in lots and lots of variations to the
Exactly.
Depends.
Which is why you don't bother.
Depends. Depends what it is.
I mean, you need to say that the project managers generally have a bit of tolerance. So there are certain things that you can do discretionary.
Yes.
Because if you don't, then the consequences of that is that every change has to be approved by the sponsor, and they're going to get thoroughly miffed by saying, "Well, they wanted a blue wall, and I've now painted it green. Can I have a change request?"
Yes, exactly.
And they'll say, "Well, what cost was that?" Well, as we hadn't done it, there was very limited cost. It was just down to changing some of the paperwork.
That's right. But that comes on to the second. That leads quite nicely to the second one, where we talk about the relationship between change control and configuration management. So you might change the colour of a wall from blue to orange. It is a change, but it might not have any cost or time implication. But it's a technical change. You may not have ordered the paint, you may not have done the drawing, you may, it just might be one word in the requirement spec, but it's still a change.
Yes,
it has to be controlled through change requests. Because the danger, if you don't put it through configuration management, is some of the walls come out blue and some of the walls come out orange.
Well, that's the trouble. I mean, you go to all this trouble creating the specification in the first place, engaging all the stakeholders and doing all that stuff. And then someone comes along and says, "Oh, no, I want a blue one, not an orange one." And the project manager might do that with all the best of intentions, but then not appreciate the fact that change has upset the remaining stakeholder population.
Yes.
They'll come and, "Oh, no, why have we done that?"
That's right.
And I mean,
That's right.
Wall colours in libraries, in schools, right, basically. So this is a good example. This is an example of exactly where I've been with this. Because you want soft colours.
Yes.
You want blues or greens.
Yes.
You don't want red.
Yes.
So someone came along and said, "I want the library walls painted orange, please, because it's nice and bright."
Yes.
And then, but all the perceived wisdom, or so I'm told, is that it shouldn't be bright.
Yes.
So quite an innocent little change caused all sorts of aggravation.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just an example of where you need to make sure you've got the requisite level of authorities. I mean, no one in the wildest dreams would ever have specified that in what the project manager is allowed to do. But they should have known that there, I suppose, potentially be an issue with it. But there's a bit of tolerance the project managers can have. Is I suppose what I'm trying to say. So they just need to know exactly what the limits of that is.
So the rule is any change to the baseline really has to go through the change control
requirements.
process. Yeah. By the baseline we mean the.
Yeah. Well, they go and change something that looks really simple and has a huge effect later on.
That's right. That's right. And I actually expect what you'd need to do for your project, you'd need to sit down with the commercial manager and the project manager and the design team and say, how are we going to manage change on this project?
That's right.
What is the integrated process of joining configuration management with change requests, with variations, and how's that all how are we going to manage that process and agree that with your client?
Well, there'll be a change process in the
sponsors
contracts normally.
Yes.
But practically on a day-to-day basis, you need to agree how it's going to work.
Yes.
What's the and that's what I was trying to say earlier on about the project management plan.
Yes.
Is you're going to have a practical day-to-day interpretation of what the contract says.
Yes.
Without restating what the contract says.
Yes, that's right.
Without affecting it, without interfering with its meaning.
Yes. Good. So that's change control, and it's linked to configuration management.
And it's linked to requirements, and it's linked to quality.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Because if you don't if you don't manage changes, you won't know whether the quality is right. So if someone's specified an orange wall and they get a blue wall, they're going to be unhappy.
Oh, so it's back to our requirements thing. So if you have a change, then you have to modify the quality requirements for that product.
Correct.
So yeah. And then so let's do the advantages and disadvantages of a change control process. The advantages are easy.
Yeah, disadvantages are that it can slow things down.
Yes, that's right. Make decision making.
You can be perceived as being a bit unhelpful.
As soon as you put money on a decision, yes, there can be a perception that you're just being commercially aggressive because you know every time I want something different, you put a blooming variation in.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that is a big disadvantage on something like a fixed price contract.
Yes.
To the client, I suppose. To the contractor, it's just an opportunity to make some more money. But,
yes.
So I think it just seems bureaucracy, slowing things down. Who's actually approving the changes is sometimes not all that clear. Who's got authority? You end up going round and round the houses, and sometimes I think a change can be foisted upon you without the person who's got a lot of authority demanding something.
Yes.
And you feel obliged to do it. So it's a sort of done deal. It's okay, I've got to do it because they've asked me to do it. And if you've got a really senior customer internally, an internal project or something, and you kind of, your only defence is the change control process, but they'll avoid it.
Yeah, well, the other issue is quite often you have a deadline to hit, so the project has to keep on rolling, so you have to assume that the change is going to be approved.
Yeah.
But you haven't sorted out whether it is actually going to be approved or not. So the poor design team end up not quite knowing what the requirements are going to be.
Well, I suppose also one thing is, there's an assumption that because you've got a change control process, everything's changeable.
Yes, okay.
So I'll just do a change request for it.
Yes, okay.
And if you've got someone who's not paying the bill, but isn't the main demander, then you could have yourself a bit of a problem, couldn't you?
Yeah. Good. So I think it's quite a good topic for the exam. I think quite an easy topic for the exam to explain.
Yeah, the process. That we didn't talk about change freezes.
Okay, let's talk about change freezes.
There's a concept of a change freeze, and basically what happens is, like you were talking about earlier on, is you get to a point where you just got to stop messing about.
That's right.
We've got to get something out now.
That's right.
We've got to a point where we need to really properly check it in a live environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so you do a change freeze and you build that product as that point.
Yes.
Development still carries on, but they sort of diverge.
That's
so
right.
one path takes you down a production route.
Yes.
The other path is continual development route.
That's right.
And you see that a lot, I think. That happens a lot.
Yes.
Because people are just desperate to get something out there.
Yes, that's right.
And approve it or otherwise.
Yes, that's right.
And I suppose, in a way, that's the kind of the agile development process, the time boxing, get this thing out, see what the customer thinks of it, and then we'll carry on developing the next bit.
Yes,
without necessarily knowing whether that's right or not.
Bit by bit.
Yeah, I mean, the consequences of that, of course, is that you could just sort of overshoot and, it not be viable, and you've done a load of work based on wrong assumptions.
Yes, I mean, yes, that's right. I mean, the downside of a design freeze is that you never freeze it. And if you do freeze it, you don't know quite what you've frozen. Really. So you build something but it's not right when you build it because you've still got the design going on somewhere else. So you end up with two teams. But at least you get something out, I suspect. Good. Excellent. Questions in the exam? Describe the change control process.
Yeah. Describe the main sources of change.
Yes. Describe why change control is important for a project. Stinker of a question, but describe the links between change control and configuration management.
Yeah.
I'm not even too sure. It's a cross-topic question, that. I think I'd have to mull that one over a little bit.
Well, no, it's not topics anymore.
Okay.
So, I mean, that sort of question is probably going to be more likely.
Yes, okay.
Change control and configuration management. I'm not sure why they differentiate, because they're one and the same thing, really.
Yes, let's move on. I was going to talk about the PMI and their integrated change control.
Let's not do that.
But you want to know how it really works.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, John.
Cheers.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast and found it informative. To order a study guide, e-learning, or a tutor-led course to go with this podcast, please visit www.parallelprojecttraining.com.